The night was heavy with silence, as Daniel clutched the crumbling letter he had found buried in the old chest. His heart pounded as the inked words bled into his trembling sight, words from a father he thought had abandoned him forever. The candle flickered violently, throwing shadows on the cracked wooden walls as he whispered, "Why now? Why after all this time?" A surge of heat rose in his chest, a mixture of rage, grief, and desperate hope. He felt the echo of betrayal ripple inside him, as if the years of unanswered questions suddenly clawed at his skin. The room seemed to shrink, the air too thick to breathe, as he realized this truth was bigger than his anger, bigger than his pain. The letter did not just speak of loss, it carried a secret that demanded he step into a world he never believed existed. Daniel said, "Father, what are you trying to tell me?" His voice cracked like the broken wood beneath his feet, carrying the weight of a man who had just glimpsed a truth sharp enough to cut his soul in two. Daniel stumbled back from the chest, his breath shallow, as if the words from the letter had pierced his lungs. The silence pressed heavy on his ears, amplifying the pounding of his heart. He whispered, "You left me, but you never truly left." The words tasted of bitterness, yet carried a fragile thread of hope that terrified him. He remembered the years of staring into empty doorways, waiting for a shadow that never came. The loneliness that carved valleys into his chest was not abandonment, it was a lie. The letter told him his father had been silenced, taken away not by choice but by something darker. His voice cracked. "Then I have lived a life of blame built on ashes." His hands curled into fists, trembling with anger at a ghost he could no longer accuse. The attic seemed to breathe around him, as though the walls themselves whispered truths he had been blind to. The weight of the revelation pressed on him, pulling him into a storm of questions too heavy to bear alone. Daniel closed his eyes, feeling the paper crinkle against his chest as memories cascaded like shards of glass. He saw his childhood self waiting by the window, whispering promises to the stars, hoping his father would return. Each memory now burned with betrayal, but a part of him clung to the faint possibility that love had been hidden in silence. His breath caught as he thought, what if the man I hated was only a victim too? He struggled to untangle grief from fury, every heartbeat striking like a hammer against his ribs. The candle flickered lower, shadows curling around him as if embracing his torment. The letter demanded courage he did not believe he had, forcing him to choose between the comfort of anger and the burden of truth. Daniel whispered, "I don't know if I can forgive you." His voice cracked like broken glass, heavy with despair, yet faintly reaching toward understanding. Daniel lowered the letter slowly, his hands trembling, and stared at the open chest. Among the dusty relics a photograph peeked out, his father's stern face beside a woman he didn't recognize. His pulse surged as questions spiraled like fire in dry wood. He whispered, "Who are you?" His throat tightened as he pulled the photo free, his father's eyes seeming to stare back, unreadable and piercing. The candle flickered, shadows leaping across the attic walls as if alive, urging him deeper into the mystery. His chest heaved, torn between anger at his father's silence and awe at the secrets hidden here. He realized that this was no ordinary discovery. It was an invitation to a journey far greater than his grief. His hands shook as he muttered, "This changes everything." The air felt alive, every creak of the wood groaning with stories untold, the silence daring him to follow. Daniel pressed the photo against the letter, his hands quivering, as if uniting them would unlock the truth. His breath was ragged, eyes searching desperately for meaning in the faded images. He whispered, "All these years I hated a lie." The ache in his chest grew heavier, spreading like a storm across his soul. He felt the walls of the attic tighten around him, the candle's glow shrinking as if the light itself feared what he would uncover. The photographs seemed to accuse him, reminding him of wasted years swallowed by anger. His jaw clenched as he muttered, "I cannot carry this alone." The truth was too heavy, too sharp, but it also ignited something raw, an ember of determination buried beneath despair. Daniel's body trembled as he realized he could not walk away. The letter was not a wound, it was a door. and stepping through it would change him forever. The morning sun crept through Daniel's window, but its warmth felt hollow. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the letter and photograph now resting on his nightstand. His reflection in the cracked mirror across the room revealed eyes hollowed by sleeplessness, weighed down by years of anger and fresh revelation. He whispered, "Who am I if I've lived my life believing a lie?" His voice carried the weariness of a man uncertain of his very foundation. Memories of his father's absence pulled him backward, each one reopening scars he thought had healed long ago. He clenched his fists, feeling the ache in his bones, yet beneath the despair flickered something else. Curiosity, a hunger for truth. "If you suffered in silence," he said softly, "then maybe I've punished the wrong man." His heart pulled between guilt and resolve, his mind unable to find rest. The truth was no longer a burden he could ignore. It had become the compass he feared to follow. Daniel dragged himself to the small kitchen, the wooden floor creaking beneath his steps. He stared at the worn table where countless solitary meals had passed, each one reminding him of absence. He poured himself black coffee, the bitter taste filling his mouth as though punishment for daring to hope. His thoughts pressed in, his father's silence, the hidden truths, and the photograph of a stranger at his father's side. He clenched the cup until his knuckles whitened. "You left me in shadows, father," he muttered, "but maybe it wasn't your choice." The words tasted of reluctant forgiveness. He slammed the cup down, spilling drops across the scarred wood, the sharp sound startling him into silence. The kitchen felt suffocating, filled with ghosts of words never spoken. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine that his anger had been built on sand, and the realization left him trembling. Later that morning, Daniel stood at the cracked bathroom mirror, gripping the sink with both hands as water dripped slowly from the faucet. He stared into his own eyes, searching for answers in their hollow depths. "What do you want from me?" he asked, not to himself but to the father who haunted every corner of his thoughts. His breath fogged the glass, distorting his reflection, as if mocking the uncertainty in his heart. He splashed cold water on his face, hoping it would wash away the heaviness, but the ache clung stubbornly. The weight of unasked questions settled on his shoulders, pulling him lower. His whisper broke the silence. "Am I strong enough to find the truth, or will it destroy me?" The words echoed in the small room, leaving him raw, vulnerable, and uncertain whether the path ahead was salvation or ruin. That evening, Daniel wandered into the old park where he once played as a boy, each bench and path carrying the weight of memories. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching under his boots, yet his chest felt heavier with every step. He sat beneath the old oak tree, staring at the fading sunlight that painted the horizon in hues of fire. "You should have been here," he whispered to the absent father, his voice trembling. The laughter of children in the distance cut into him, a reminder of what had been stolen. His fists pressed into the cold earth, grounding him as his heart battled with grief. He said, "You were more than a ghost, weren't you?" The words carried both accusation and plea, drifting into the autumn wind. Daniel realized the answers he needed would not come from the park or its echoes. They waited in the shadows of truths yet to be faced. As night fell, Daniel returned home, the silence of his small house pressing like a weight against his chest. He lit the candle again, its flame fragile but steady, as he placed the photograph and letter side by side. His hand hovered over them, unwilling to let go yet terrified to hold on. He whispered, "You're still here, aren't you? Not in body but in truth." His voice cracked, carried by both grief and a fragile thread of hope. He felt the letter's presence like a heartbeat, drawing him forward into something greater than himself. His body ached with exhaustion, but his spirit trembled with the first spark of determination. He realized he could not run from this revelation. It would chase him, shape him, break him, and rebuild him. Daniel closed his eyes and murmured, "I will find you, Father, even if it destroys me." Daniel walked through the narrow streets of his town, the letter and photograph tucked safely inside his coat pocket. His boots echoed against the cracked pavement, each step heavy with uncertainty. He replayed his father's absence in his mind, not as abandonment now, but as a puzzle yet unsolved. Shadows of doubt followed him, whispering questions he could not silence. He muttered under his breath, "Why keep me in the dark, Father?" The chill wind pressed against his face, biting and sharp, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside his chest. Every corner he turned seemed to taunt him with memories. Empty chairs, unanswered prayers, unspoken words. He clenched his fists, his body tightening as if preparing for a confrontation that never came. He whispered, "If truth is what you've left me, then I will chase it, no matter how much it hurts." Yet, beneath his courage, fear dug its claws deep, waiting to break him. Later, Daniel entered a small tavern, its smoky air thick with voices and laughter. He sat in the farthest corner, alone, pulling the letter from his coat. His eyes scanned the words again, though every line was burned into his memory. A man at the next table noticed, his voice cutting sharp through the noise, "Secrets won't give you peace, friend." Daniel's head snapped up, his heart racing at the stranger's intrusion. The man's eyes were cold, filled with cynicism, as though mocking Daniel's fragile hope. Daniel forced his voice steady. "Some secrets demand answers, whether they wound or heal." The man smirked, shaking his head. "Truth is poison. Best you leave it buried." Daniel felt a shiver crawl up his spine, recognizing the embodiment of his own doubt staring back at him. He clenched the letter tighter, whispering to himself, "I can't run anymore." His conviction trembled, but it did not break. Daniel stormed out of the tavern, the stranger's words echoing in his mind like venom. The night air was sharp, carrying the smell of rain as clouds gathered overhead. His chest rose and fell with fury as he muttered, "You think I'm afraid of truth. You don't know me." Yet deep inside, the man's words gnawed at him, stirring shadows he could not ignore. The thought that truth might indeed be poison haunted him, wrapping chains around his heart. He paused beneath a flickering street lamp, gripping the letter as if it might dissolve in his hand. The memory of his father's absence sharpened, now joined by the weight of doubt. He whispered bitterly, "Am I chasing freedom or walking into ruin?" Lightning cracked in the distance, illuminating his pale, determined face. His shadow stretched long against the cobblestones, reminding him of battles not yet fought. Daniel's footsteps carried him into the cemetery where his father's grave lay. The iron gate groaned as he pushed it open, the night heavy with silence broken only by rustling leaves. The gravestone was worn, moss creeping over its surface, yet the name carved into it stabbed at Daniel's heart. He dropped to his knees, placing the letter against the cold stone. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I hated you for so long, but maybe I never knew you at all." Tears blurred his vision, falling onto the grass below. He clenched his fists, his body trembling as memories of abandonment collided with the possibility of hidden sacrifice. He said, "If you were taken from me, then I cursed a man who never deserved it." The grave stood silent, offering no answers, only the chilling reminder that the dead cannot speak. Daniel's heart broke open, yet somewhere deep, resolve took root. As Daniel left the graveyard, the chill of the night clung to him like a second skin. He walked slowly, his steps heavy, but his eyes carried a new fire. The truth was not just a wound, it was a path, sharp and dangerous, but undeniable. He whispered, "I will not stop until I know everything." Yet, even as determination burned, doubt whispered in his mind, echoing the stranger's words. He clenched his jaw, shaking his head as though to cast the thoughts aside. The storm above cracked again, rain beginning to fall in steady drops, soaking his coat and hair. His fists tightened at his sides, his body trembling from exhaustion, grief, and rage interwoven. "If wisdom is pain," he said fiercely, "then I will embrace it." His voice carried into the night, swallowed by thunder, yet resonating in his chest as the vow of a man stepping deeper into conflict. Daniel returned to the attic, driven by a restless fire, determined to uncover every secret left behind. He pushed aside the chest again, and found a smaller locked box buried beneath old blankets. His breath caught as he lifted it, heavier than it looked, the lock rusted yet intact. Frustration surged, and he slammed it on the floor, breaking it open. Inside lay letters written in the same handwriting as his father's, sealed, but never sent. His hands shook as he opened the first one, his father's words bleeding into him like fire. "I am sorry, my son. I never abandoned you. They took me." Daniel's heart pounded, rage and sorrow colliding in his chest, tears blurring his sight. He whispered, "You fought for me, and I hated you for it." The room felt alive, the candle flickering violently as though echoing his storm. His father's silence had never been betrayal, it had been sacrifice. As Daniel read further, he found his father describing a shadowy organization, men who silenced anyone who dared to speak the truth. His father's words painted a picture of danger, of threats and betrayal from those once trusted. Daniel's stomach churned as he whispered, "You weren't silent, you were silenced." The revelation cut through years of resentment, replacing it with guilt sharp enough to bleed. He pressed the letters to his chest, sobbing quietly, his voice breaking. "Forgive me, Father. I cursed your name when you only fought to protect me." The attic grew colder, as if the walls themselves absorbed his grief. His heart trembled with a new fear. If those who silenced his father still lived, what would they do if Daniel pursued the truth? He clenched his jaw, whispering fiercely, "Then let them come. I will finish what you began." That night, Daniel dreamed vividly, standing in a foggy forest where shadows whispered his doubts. From the mist, an older man appeared, his father's face, lined with age but alive, gazing at him with sorrow and strength. The apparition spoke softly. "The truth is not a gift, it is a burden, one you must carry if you seek to be free." Daniel's breath caught as he stepped closer, reaching for the figure that dissolved into mist. His heart pounded as the words echoed, leaving him trembling. He awoke in sweat, gasping, clutching the letter tightly in the dark. He whispered, "You're still guiding me, aren't you?" His voice cracked under the weight of longing. The dream blurred lines between memory and vision, but one thing was certain, he was no longer walking blind. His father had given him a path, even if it led into darkness. Daniel, shaken by the dream, sought counsel in the old library where his father once spent long hours. The musty scent of books filled his lungs, each shelf whispering fragments of forgotten wisdom. He sat at a heavy oak table, placing the letter and photograph before him as though they were holy relics. His trembling voice carried into the silence, "If you were taken because you sought truth, then I will not stop until I understand why." As he turned the pages of history books, he found notes scribbled in his father's handwriting, hidden in margins like secret maps. The discovery struck him. His father had left clues buried in plain sight. Daniel whispered, "You wanted me to find this." His heart steadied, a fragile flame of purpose growing in the cavern of despair. The library no longer felt lonely. It felt alive, echoing with his father's presence. As he traced the notes, Daniel realized his father had been preparing him all along, even in absence. His grief shifted into a strange gratitude, an understanding that he was not abandoned but entrusted. He stood in the quiet library, clutching the photograph to his chest, whispering, "You believed in me, even when I cursed your name." His shoulders trembled under the weight of this trust, tears falling freely down his face. He understood now that his path was not just to uncover the truth, but to embody it, to carry it forward even against the forces that silenced his father. Daniel's voice grew steadier as he declared, "I will carry your wisdom. I will not break." The silence seemed to embrace him, the dust-filled air alive with unseen presence. It was no longer just his father's fight. It was his own. Rain lashed against the windows as Daniel returned home, the storm outside reflecting the one raging inside. He spread the letters and notes across his table, his eyes burning with exhaustion yet alive with determination. Shadows danced on the walls as thunder rolled above, the candlelight trembling like his own breath. He whispered, "This is the moment, Father. I see it now. Your silence was sacrifice, not betrayal." His chest heaved as he slammed a fist on the table, the sound echoing like a vow. Yet doubt slithered in, whispering from the shadows, What if you're not strong enough? What if you fail as he did? Daniel's body trembled, his hands clawing at the table's edge as he fought against the inner voice. He roared into the storm, "I am not you, but I will finish what you started." His cry was raw, breaking years of silence, declaring both rebellion and love. Daniel's head dropped to his hands as the inner shadow rose louder, the voice of doubt snarling inside him. It whispered, "You will fail. You are weak. You are nothing." His heart pounded violently, as though breaking under the weight of despair. He clenched his teeth, gripping the letter until it nearly tore. "No," he growled, "I am not nothing." His body shook as memories of loneliness, rejection, and grief surged back, demanding surrender. Tears fell, hot and relentless, carving paths down his cheeks. For a moment he wanted to collapse, to let the shadow consume him. But his father's words echoed within, "Wisdom is not given, it is found." Daniel lifted his head, eyes blazing through the tears, and whispered fiercely, "Then let me find it even in pain." The shadow raged within, but for the first time he did not flinch. He faced himself. Lightning cracked outside as Daniel stood, fists clenched, his body trembling like a storm contained within flesh. He faced the mirror across the room, his reflection blurred by condensation. The shadow in his mind sneered, "You are your father's failure." He slammed his palm against the glass, his voice shaking, "I am my father's strength." His breath came ragged, his eyes fierce, his body coiled like a warrior stepping into battle. The storm outside raged in harmony with the fire in his chest. He whispered, "I will carry the burden, no matter the cost." For the first time, the shadow faltered, weakening under the force of his conviction. His reflection no longer mocked him but mirrored his unyielding resolve. He understood then that the fight was not against enemies outside, but against surrender within. The climax had arrived. He was no longer the boy abandoned. He was the man chosen. Daniel collapsed to his knees, breath ragged, his hands gripping the wooden floor as thunder boomed above. He whispered, "This pain, it will not break me." His chest heaved, every muscle straining against the invisible weight pressing down. He lifted the photograph once more, staring at his father's eyes, no longer accusing, but guiding. His tears fell onto the photo, smudging its edges, yet his grip tightened. "I will not curse you anymore," he whispered. "I will honor you." The storm seemed to answer, lightning flashing, rain pounding the roof, as though the world itself acknowledged his vow. He bowed his head, shoulders trembling, but his spirit stood taller than ever before. The climax was not in conquering others, but in conquering himself. He finally understood that wisdom was not the absence of pain, but the courage to walk through it unbroken. Daniel rose slowly from the floor, his body exhausted but his spirit unyielding. The storm outside began to quiet, though rain still tapped steadily against the window. He gathered the letters, the photograph and the notes, placing them carefully into a leather satchel. His hands no longer trembled. He whispered, "This is my burden, and my gift." His father's silence was no longer a wound. It was a torch passed into his hands. He slung the satchel over his shoulder, stepping toward the door with a steady stride. The candle burned low behind him, its flame steady now, no longer flickering. He paused only once, glancing back at the room that had been his prison of grief. "I will not return the same man," he said firmly. His voice carried into the quiet house, a vow etched into stone. The storm eased as he opened the door, stepping into the unknown, carrying both pain and wisdom forward. Daniel's steps led him to the outskirts of town, where the old train tracks stretched endlessly under the gray sky. His satchel pressed heavy against his shoulder, filled with the letters and memories of his father's struggle. The air smelled of rust and rain, the sound of distant thunder still echoing faintly. He whispered, "Every path begins with pain, but it cannot end there." His boots crunched on gravel as he stared down the long rails that seemed to vanish into infinity. The doubts still pressed at him, but their voices were quieter now, like fading echoes. He inhaled deeply, filling his lungs with the weight of change. The rails were not just metal, they were lines leading him into the unknown, away from grief, and toward truth. He said firmly, "This is not the end of mourning. It is the beginning of becoming." His heart, though scarred, carried a fire no storm could extinguish. Daniel arrived at a small riverside, the waters rushing fast with the remnants of the storm. He crouched at the bank, pulling one of his father's unsent letters from the satchel. His voice trembled. "I have carried anger like chains, but you carried silence like a shield." He dipped the edge of the paper into the rushing water, watching the ink bleed into the current. His chest ached as he whispered, "I will not hold the past as a prison anymore." The river's roar seemed to answer, pulling his grief downstream, fragment by fragment. He closed his eyes, letting the cool wind sting his skin, cleansing him in ways tears could not. Rising slowly, his body trembled with release. The pain was still there, but it no longer owned him. "This is your wisdom, Father," he said softly, "to let go so I can carry forward." Daniel wandered into the abandoned chapel on the hill, its doors creaking as he entered. The faint scent of old wood and dust filled the air, sunlight filtering through cracked stained glass to scatter fractured colors across the stone floor. He walked slowly toward the altar, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Laying the photograph of his father before the steps, he whispered, "I cannot speak to you, but I can stand for you." His knees trembled as he bowed his head, not in worship, but in surrender to truth. His tears fell silently onto the stone, joining years of unspoken prayers. Yet this time his words were not of anger or blame, they were of resolve. "I will carry your silence as my voice," he said firmly. The chapel seemed to breathe with him, the fractured colors bathing him like fragile blessings of light. Daniel's journey carried him to the cliffs overlooking the sea, waves crashing violently against jagged rocks below. The wind tore at his coat, carrying salt and spray into his face, but he stood firm. His heart still bore the ache of loss, but his gaze no longer looked backward. He held one final letter from his father, unopened, trembling in his grip. He whispered, "I will not fear what I may find." Slowly he unfolded the paper, his eyes tracing the words that spoke not of death, but of faith. "You will find wisdom not in me, but in yourself." His chest heaved, his knees weak, yet his heart soared with those words. He let the wind take the letter from his hands, carrying it into the roaring sea. His voice rose with the waves, "I will live as you believed I could." The sea answered in thunderous applause. As night fell, Daniel sat by a quiet fire he built on the outskirts of the forest. The letters were gone, the photograph laid carefully in his satchel, now carried as remembrance instead of burden. He stared into the flames, listening to the soft crackle and the distant whisper of wind through the trees. For the first time his chest did not feel like a cage. He whispered, "I am not healed, but I am whole enough to walk forward." His father's voice echoed within him, not as a ghost, but as a guide. Daniel leaned back against a log, exhaling slowly, letting peace settle where torment once lived. "Wisdom," he said softly, "is not the absence of pain. It is the strength to carry it with grace." His lips curved faintly into the first true smile in years, small but unshakable. Morning light broke through the trees as Daniel rose from his place by the fire. The forest hummed with life, birds singing as if to welcome a new beginning. He stretched his arms, the ache of exhaustion still heavy, but it no longer defined him. His steps were slow but steady, his path uncertain yet clear in purpose. He whispered, "I will not live in shadows anymore." His voice trembled, but it carried strength. Every breath he took filled him with both memory and promise, grief and hope. He adjusted his satchel across his shoulder and walked toward the faint path leading out of the clearing. For the first time, the weight he carried felt less like chains and more like wings. Daniel walked along the country road, the morning sun warming his face. Fields stretched wide on both sides, filled with golden grain swaying in the gentle breeze. The world felt open, limitless, yet still demanding. His father's silence no longer haunted him, it guided him. He whispered, "You taught me without words." His steps were steady, each one carrying him further from grief and closer to destiny. He no longer sought to erase the pain, he carried it as a mark of love. The horizon stretched endlessly, and though fear still lurked, it no longer controlled him. His heart beat like a drum of resolve, steady and unbroken. He paused at a small village on his path, watching children laugh as they chased each other across the square. The sound pierced him, sharp with memory, yet softened with healing. He smiled faintly, whispering, "Life continues, even when we break." He saw fathers lifting children into the air, mothers calling their names with love. For a moment, pain rose again, but it no longer consumed him. It shaped his understanding. He murmured, "This is why you fought, Father. Not for silence, but for love." His eyes burned with unshed tears, but his smile remained steady. He turned from the square, walking forward with renewed fire. As the day wore on, Daniel climbed a hill overlooking the horizon, his figure small against the vast expanse of sky. The sun lowered, casting the world in hues of amber and fire. He sat at the crest, his satchel beside him, staring at the endless stretch of land below. His father's words returned once more. "Wisdom is not given, it is found." He whispered them aloud, each syllable carried by the wind. His chest filled with a quiet pride, not in victory but in survival. He no longer felt broken, he felt transformed. The climb had not erased his scars, it had turned them into proof of endurance. He whispered, "I am my father's legacy, and my own truth." Night returned, stars blanketing the sky as Daniel walked onward. He paused on a quiet path, gazing upward, his heart swelling with wonder. He whispered, "I am not the boy who hated you. I am the man who carries you." His voice carried both grief and gratitude, echoing into the night. He stood still, the silence around him no longer heavy but sacred. His journey was not over, but the man who began in anguish no longer existed. In his place stood one forged by pain, guided by truth, and carried by love. He whispered his final vow, "I will not waste the gift of your silence. I will live." His steps resumed, steady and strong, fading into the night as the stars watched, endless and eternal.